I'm Sujani, faculty in physics at Institute of Aeronautical Engineering, Hyderabad. Today we are going to discuss a very important topic, that is Hall effect in semiconductors. For the past few lectures, we have been discussing about semiconductors, their types, and we have already covered these topics regarding free electron theory, Bloch theorem, Kronig-Penney model, classification of materials, intrinsic and extrinsic semiconductors, and carrier concentration in intrinsic as well as extrinsic. We have also derived expressions for carrier concentration, which will help us in doing the numericals. We have also discussed about the Fermi level and its effect of temperature and concentration. Today we are going to discuss Hall effect. Now let us see the brief outline of how we are going to discuss the topic. First, we will understand the concept of Hall effect, what exactly Hall effect says. Then we will see the experimental setup to do the Hall effect. Then we will derive expressions for RH, that is the Hall coefficient, and also the Hall voltage. And then we'll discuss the applications in scientific applications and also day-to-day applications we are going to discuss. So coming to Hall effect. When a material carrying current is subjected to a magnetic field in a direction perpendicular to the direction of flow of current, an electric field is developed in a direction perpendicular to both the directions of magnetic field and current. So how do we understand this? If you have a material, here we are talking about semiconductor, and if you allow current to flow through the semiconductor. So now I will consider a three-dimensional system. This is the X, Y and the Z axis. We are allowing the current to flow through the conductor in one direction. Suppose I take the direction of current I along the x-axis. So we have taken a material carrying current. Now this is subjected to a magnetic field in a direction perpendicular to the current. So what we have to do, we have to subject this semiconductor or the material to a magnetic field in a direction perpendicular to the flow of current. Means we can apply field along this direction, Z direction. So these two are perpendicular to each other. Then what happens? An electric field is developed in a direction perpendicular to both magnetic field and current. So now how is the electric field developed? The electric field is developed along the y-axis. So this is the basic concept we need to understand. We are taking a current carrying semiconductor through which current is flowing, and if we apply a magnetic field perpendicular to the flow of current, then there will be an electric field that is developed perpendicular to the magnetic field as well as the current. So we say they are mutually perpendicular. That is why I have represented them by the X, Y and the Z axis. Now this effect which we are seeing here, we call it as Hall effect, and the voltage that is developed is called the Hall voltage. Whenever we are talking about an electric field, we will have a separation of charges, positive and negative. Suppose if we have positive charges here and negative here, there is always a field developed between the two. Because of this, there will be a difference in voltage between the two. We consider plus always to be at a higher potential and negative always to be at a lower potential. So because of the field that is generated, there will be a potential difference between the two, and we can measure the potential difference, which we call it as Hall voltage. Now this Hall effect, we will just see the history, how it happened. It was discovered by E.H. Hall in 1879, which helps to resolve the dilemma of the sign of the charges. Sign means what is the sign the charges carry. Now we know that electrons carry positive negative charge and positive ions carry positive charge. But if you are given a semiconductor, to know what is the sign of the charges, this effect was discovered and it is named after the scientist as Hall effect. Now, when a moving charge is subjected to the influence of a magnetic field, it experiences a force. So, this is an already existing phenomena. Whenever you have a moving charge and you subject it to a magnetic field, it will experience a force and we call this force as Lorentz force. Lorentz is again named after the scientist Lorentz. So, how we are going to use it? So, to know the direction, we use Fleming's left-hand rule. You can see the diagram here. What Fleming left-hand rule says is, if the three fingers of the left hand are stretched mutually perpendicular to each other, means if you are placing the first three fingers of your left hand in a mutually perpendicular direction, means all three should be perpendicular to each other. In this way, we need to stretch our fingers. And if the forefinger represents the magnetic field, the middle finger denotes the current, then thumb is pointing the direction in which the charges experience thrust. This is what we need to understand. So let me explain this with the help of this diagram. So we are stretching the three fingers, the thumb, the forefinger and the middle finger perpendicular to each other. Now the forefinger represents the magnetic field. Forefinger represents magnetic field, means we are applying a magnetic field in the direction shown by the forefinger. And then if the current flows in the direction of the middle finger, if we have the current flowing in this direction, then the force, the direction of the force is represented by thumb. So the thumb represents the force. So if this represents the magnetic field, forefinger, middle finger represents the direction of flow of current, then the thumb represents the direction of force. So let us see it with the help of a simulation. Now if you see here, we have placed a conductor, a current carrying conductor. This is the current carrying conductor in between a magnetic field. So you can see this is the north pole and this is the south pole. So in between these two magnets with north pole and south pole facing each other, we are placing them so that we have uniform field in between the two magnets. So in the magnetic field, we are placing a conductor which is carrying current. So if this is the direction of the flow of magnetic field, this is the direction of the flow of magnetic field, and this is the direction of flow of current, then what happens? Whenever you have these two mutually perpendicular to each other, the magnetic field and the current mutually perpendicular to each other, see, this is experiencing a force. So the conductor is getting an upward thrust in this direction, or depending upon the direction of the flow of current, it may have a downward thrust. So if the current flows in the downward direction, if this is the magnetic field, the thrust, the force acts in this direction, that is towards me. Now if I reverse the direction of flow of current, say if the current flows in the upward direction and the magnetic field remains in this direction, now the thrust will be in this direction away from me. So depending upon the direction of flow of current, the direction of the force changes. That is what we are seeing here. This represents the magnetic field, this represents the current, and the conductor is experiencing a force in the upward direction. So you can see all the three mutually perpendicular to each other. Now let us understand what it happens in case of a conductor. So when an voltage is applied to a conductor or a semiconductor, electric current flows through it. And in conductors, we see that the electric current is due to the free electrons. Whenever we talk about conductors, if current has to flow, there should be free electrons. So current is due to the movement of electrons. So current is conducted by free electrons. But whereas in semiconductors, electric current is due to both free electrons and holes. We'll be discussing much about these electrons and holes, how they contribute to current in this lecture. So what we are trying to understand, if it is conductors, it is only due to electrons. But if it is a semiconductors, it is due to both free electrons and holes. Now, the free electrons in a semiconductor or a conductor always try to flow in a free path or a straight path. But because of continuous collisions with the atoms, the electrons slightly change their direction. Whenever there is a collision between the atoms, they may change their path. Then what happens if we apply a voltage which is strong enough? Then the free electrons will forcefully follow a straight path. All the electrons which are flowing along a straight direction, due to collisions, they may change their direction. But on applying a field, again they try to travel in the same direction along the straight path. This happens only if no other forces are applied in that direction. There should not be the effect of other forces on the flow of electrons. Now, if we are talking about semiconductors, we have already discussed in this chapter. In semiconductors, there are two types, a p-type and n-type. And we have also seen that in n-type semiconductor, free electrons are the majority carriers. In n-type semiconductor, electrons are the majority carriers and holes are the minority carriers. We have derived expressions for the charge carrier concentration also. What does this mean? If the free electrons are the majority carriers and holes are the minority carriers, it means that most of the current in n-type is due to free electrons. That is what we need to understand. Whenever we are talking about an n-type semiconductor, the majority carriers are electrons. Therefore, the current is due to electrons. These are the two main points we need to understand. Then if you see a p-type semiconductor, in p-type, holes are majority carriers and electrons will be minority. So we have also discussed in p-type, because of the trivalent impurity we are adding and a deficiency of electron being there, which is nothing but a hole, we are calling it as. Holes are the majority carriers and free electrons are the minority carriers. Therefore, in a p-type, so the current is conducted due to holes. The current in a p-type conductor is due to the holes. That is the basic difference we need to understand now between n-type and p-type. Now we have got an idea about the p-type and the n-type semiconductors. But how do we identify whether a given conductor or a semiconductor is p-type or n-type? We are given a semiconductor. We have two types in semiconductors. If it is doped with a pentavalent impurity, we are calling it as n-type. And if it is doped with a trivalent impurity, we are calling it as p-type. And in n-type, electrons are the majority carriers. And in p-type, holes are the majority carriers. But how do you identify that a semiconductor is either a p-type or an n-type? Because these electrons and holes, they are very small in size. And you cannot see them with your eyes, obviously. But with the help of Hall effect, you can easily identify whether a semiconductor is a p-type or an n-type. This is the main advantage of this Hall effect, or the main usage of Hall effect, where we will be able to identify the type of semiconductor, whether it is a p-type or an n-type. So let us now understand how we are going to identify it. Now, if the magnetic field is applied to an n-type semiconductor, both the free electrons and holes are pushed downward to the bottom surface of the N-type semiconductor. So whatever we have discussed in the Hall effect, we have to apply here. So this is a semiconductor. We are taking a semiconductor. Okay, which is carrying current. This is the direction of flow of current. Electric current is along the x-axis. Now we are subjecting it to a magnetic field along the z-axis. So if the magnetic field is applied to an N-type semiconductor which is carrying current. Now these two are perpendicular to each other, the current and the magnetic field. They are perpendicular to each other. Then because of these two, we have seen in Hall effect, there will be a force that is acting on the charges. And because of these charges, what happens? There will be separation of charges. All the charges will be deposited at the bottom. And here, most of them are electrons, because we are talking about N-type. And in N-type, what happens? Electrons and holes are pushed to the bottom surface, but holes are negligible in N-type. The majority carriers are electrons. So free electrons are accumulated at the bottom surface. So these are all what we see here. All these are electrons. So we can say that there is a negative charge that is developed here, and this will be positive with respect to that. So when there is separation of charges, there is a field that is developed between the two. So this is what we have to understand here. We have taken a semiconductor. We are allowing the current to flow through it along the x-axis, x direction. And this is subjected to a magnetic field along the z-axis. And because of these two effects, there will be a force acting on the charges. And they are separated. I can say that because in N-type, the majority carriers are electrons, all the electrons are deposited in the downward direction. So the upward becomes positive. So because of this, there is an electric field. Now, this produces a negative charge on the bottom surface with an equal amount of positive charge on the upper surface. We have seen positive charge upper surface, negative charge bottom surface. So what happens here? An N-type semiconductor, the bottom surface is negatively charged. Upper surface is positively charged. And because of this, what happens? There is a potential difference that is developed between the upper and the bottom. Whenever there is a separation of charges, there is a difference in potential, which we call as potential difference. So in N-type semiconductor, the electric field is primarily due to the negatively charged free electrons. So the majority carriers are electrons. So we are saying that in N-type semiconductor, the field is due to the negatively charged free electrons. Now, the Hall voltage that is produced is negative. So we said there is a difference in potential that is occurring. And because of the potential difference, there is an voltage we can measure. Okay. And this voltage is negative in case of N-type semiconductor. So if you measure the voltage and if the voltage is negative, that means it is an N-type semiconductor. Without seeing the charges, by measuring the voltage, you are able to say which type of semiconductor it is. Now coming to P-type. So we will see the same setup. We have taken a semiconductor. We have current flowing along the x-axis, subjected to a magnetic field along the z-axis. So now, if this is a P-type semiconductor, then what happens? Both electrons and holes are pushed in the downward direction, but in P-type, the majority carriers are holes. So we see that the bottom surface, all the holes are being deposited and the electrons are minority. So what happens here? This bottom surface will be positively charged and the top surface will be negatively charged. So because of this separation, there will be a field that is generated. So if the magnetic field is applied to a p-type semiconductor, the majority carriers, that are holes, and the minority carriers are pushed down towards the bottom surface of the p-type semiconductor. But free electrons are negligible because they are minority carriers, and holes are the majority carriers and they are accumulated at the bottom surface of the p-type semiconductor. So in a p-type semiconductor, the bottom surface is positively charged and the upper surface is negatively charged. So as a result of this separation of charges, there is a potential difference that is developed between the bottom and the upper surface of the p-type semiconductor. So in a p-type semiconductor, the electric field is primarily due to the positively charged holes. So in n-type, it is due to electrons, and in p-type, it is due to holes. Now, if the Hall voltage that is produced is measured in a p-type, you get it to be positive. So if the Hall voltage is positive, it means it is a p-type semiconductor. Therefore, by applying a magnetic field and measuring the Hall voltage, we are able to say what type of semiconductor it is. We are able to identify the type of semiconductor. Now let us see the setup for the Hall experiment, how we are going to do that. So the apparatus required here is an electromagnet. This is to generate the magnetic field. We have a constant power supply and then a digital Gauss meter to measure the magnetic field. Then a Hall probe stand with a Hall effect panel, and we also have a probe stand and a probe. Okay, so now what you see in the picture here is this is an electromagnet. So how we are getting this electromagnet here is, you are taking two soft iron cores and they are wound by wires through which the current can flow. So now this is connected to a constant power supply. This is the power supply. This is the power supply. So now when you allow current to flow through the coil which is surrounding these soft iron cores, because of the current that is flowing through the coil, these soft iron cores will behave like magnets. It is nothing but the magnetic effects of electric current. Whenever a current flows through a coil, magnetic field is produced surrounding it. So the magnetic field is induced inside the soft iron core. So they behave like magnets. And we place them in such a way that the north pole of one will face the south pole of the other, so that there will be a uniform field in between the two electromagnets. Now, in order to measure the magnetic field, we need a Gauss meter. Gauss meter is an instrument which is used to measure the magnetic field. So we are using this Gauss meter to measure the magnetic field. It will have a sensor. When you place the sensor inside, you can adjust the magnetic field with the help of the knobs and keep the required magnetic field. And it varies with the amount of current that is flowing through the coil. And then we have a Hall probe. We have a panel in which we have the semiconductor placed. So with the help of this stand, we will keep the semiconductor in between the two magnets. Here in this position, we can place the magnet because we have to keep the current carrying semiconductor in a magnetic field. So with the help of this, we will place it here. So now the current and the magnetic field will be perpendicular to each other. Then there will be separation of charges. So we can measure the current with the help of this Hall setup. Now we will try to understand in the specimen. So we have taken a semiconductor specimen, means the material which we have taken, we are calling it as a specimen, in which we will have to find which type of semiconductor it is and what is the concentration of the charge carriers. Now this specimen is carrying current. Now if I say this is the specimen we are talking about, This is the specimen. Along this, we will allow the current to flow. I will flow along the x-axis. This is the direction of flow of current. So it is a current carrying semiconductor along the x direction. Now, if this specimen is subjected to magnetic field along the z direction, means we are applying magnetic field along the z axis. This is the z axis. So we are applying a magnetic field B. So now these two, I, the current I and the magnetic field B, they are perpendicular to each other. That is how we are subjecting the specimen to electric and magnetic fields. Now, because of that, what happens? A potential difference is formed from the top to the bottom of the specimen. We have discussed this very clearly. So there is a difference in potential because of the separation of charges. A potential difference is formed from the top to the bottom of the specimen. So the potential difference causes a field and that flows along the negative y-axis. And due to EH, what we have? There is a force that acts up in the upward direction. So because of the electric field and the magnetic field, there is a force that is acting on the charges. The force that separates the charges and that is acting in the upward direction along the y-axis. Then what happens? We have a force due to the electric field which is given by Fe is equal to EEH. So Fe, we are denoting the force due to the electric field. And in equilibrium condition, what happens? The upward force due to the electric field should be equal to the downward force due to the magnetic field. We have the magnetic field in the downward direction. So in equilibrium condition, what happens? The upward force due to the electric field should be equal to the downward force due to the magnetic field. B here represents the magnetic field. So now we are going to equate the two. The force due to the magnetic field and force due to the electric field. FB here represent force due to magnetic field and Fe represents the force due to electric field. This is the force due to electric field. And at equilibrium condition, these two are equal. So FB is equal to Fe. Now what is the formula for FB? FB is equal to BeV. We should have written it the other way. If I am writing FB is equal to Fe, so FB is given by B, E, V. B is the magnetic field, E is the charge of the electron and V is the voltage or the potential difference here. Then Fe is given by E, EH. So now we have E and E will get cancelled. You have V is equal to EH upon B. We are writing the formula for V. So V is equal to EH upon B. So we are representing it by equation 1. V is equal to EH upon B. Now if we talk about the current density, J is the current density. The current density is given by NeV. N is the number or the concentration and E is the charge and V is the potential difference. So J, the current density is given by NeV. So from J is equal to NeV, we can write the formula for V as V is equal to J upon Ne. We will take this as equation 2. What did we have in equation 1? V is equal to EH upon B. This is what we have seen in the previous slide. We have written equation 1, that is V is equal to EH upon B. Now, since the left hand side is the same, V and B, we can equate the right hand side. So what is there on the right hand side? EH upon B is equal to J upon Ne. Or I can take B onto the other side and write the formula for EH. So EH is equal to J into B upon NE. Or we can also write it as J cross B as B cross J. So we'll get a minus sign in that case upon NE. Now I can write it as EH is equal to minus 1 by NE. Can separate and write it as BJ. Why? Because we are going to keep this as a constant. So what we have got for EH is equal to minus 1 upon NE into BJ. This is the formula we are getting for EH. Now what we are defining? RH is equal to minus 1 upon Ne for electrons. This minus 1 upon Ne which we have put it separately, we are calling it as RH. So this RH is minus 1 upon Ne for electrons. If it is electrons, it is minus 1 upon Ne. And for holes, it will be plus 1 upon P. RH is equal to 1 upon Pe for holes. Now from that equation 3, we can write EH is equal to RH into Bj, or RH is equal to EH upon Bj. So this is the equation we get now. So RH, because for 1 upon Ne, what we had here is EH is equal to minus 1 upon Ne into Bj. So for this we are substituting RH. So if we substitute RH for this, what is the equation we are getting? EH is equal to RH into Bj. If we want to write the formula for RH, so RH will be equal to EH upon Bj. So this is the formula we get here. So what these terms represent here is N represents the electron density, P represents the hole density, EH is the Hall electric field, the electric field that is developed, which we are calling it due to the Hall effect. So we are presenting it as EH, the Hall electric field. Then RH is the Hall coefficient, B is the magnetic field, and J is the current density. All the terms here are defined. RH we are calling as Hall coefficient, EH we are calling as the electric field due to the Hall effect, B is the magnetic field applied, J is the current density. So we are naming it as equation number 5. Now how to determine the value of RH? RH is equal to EH upon Bj we have. Now how do we substitute for VH? Let VH be the Hall voltage. We are taking a sample of thickness T. So the voltage is given by E into D. E into D is a general expression here. V is equal to ED is a general expression where V is the voltage, E is the electric field, and D is the separation between the two plates where the electric field is developed. So I will call it as distance. Distance between the two plates where there is a field. So V is equal to E into D. Now here we are calling this voltage as Hall voltage VH. We are calling the electric field due to the Hall effect as EH. And the distance, because it is along the thickness, the separation of charges is along the thickness, we are writing it as T. So VH is equal to EH into T, or we can simply write EH as VH by T. This is equation number 6. Now if B is the width of the sample, because when we are talking about semiconductor, if this is the length, this will be the breadth and this will be the thickness. So length L, this will be the breadth B, and this will be the thickness T. Now if you want the area of this is given by breadth into thickness. So A is equal to B into T. And the general formula for current density J is current per unit area. Current density is nothing but current per unit area. J is equal to I upon A. So we are writing I upon A. For A we are going to substitute B into T. So J is equal to I upon B into T. Now let us substitute this value of J in the formula we have. So what did we have? RH is equal to EH upon BJ. Now for EH what we got? EH is equal to VH upon T, because the electric field is in between the two sides which have a thickness T. So EH is equal to VH by T and J is equal to I upon B into T. So these two we are going to substitute here. So RH will be equal to, in the numerator we have VH by T for EH, and in the denominator we have B as it is. For J we are going to substitute I upon BT. So VH by T upon B into I by BT. Rearrange the terms. So what do we get? VH by T into BT small bt. Here small b represents the breadth and capital B here represents the magnetic field. So this is B into I. So T and T will get cancelled. We are left with only VH into small b upon capital B into I. So that is what we are seeing here. RH is equal to VH into B upon capital B into I. This is equation number 8. So what we have done now is we are deriving an expression for the Hall coefficient. RH is equal to VH into B upon B into I. Because if you know the Hall coefficient, if the value of Hall coefficient is negative, then we have seen if RH is negative, then it is N-type. If RH is positive, it is P-type. So with the help of this expression, we will be able to know which type of semiconductor it is. Now, if you have a magnetic field B, and suppose if the thickness of the specimen is given by T, which is carrying a current I and the Hall voltage VH, then we will slightly modify the expression as RH is equal to VH into T upon B into I, where RH is the Hall coefficient VH is the Hall voltage, T is the thickness of the specimen or the given semiconductor, B is the magnetic field, and I is the current. So when a current carrying semiconductor is subjected to a magnetic field B, this current is subjected to a magnetic field B, then there is a voltage that is developed across this thickness. So we have the Hall coefficient. So Hall coefficient is given by VH into T upon B into I. Now how we are writing the formula for RH. RH is inversely proportional to the charge concentration. RH is equal to 1 upon PE. E is the charge, but P here is the concentration of the charge carriers. In P-type, the majority carriers are holes, so it will be the concentration of holes. Small p here denotes the concentration of holes. So RH in P-type is given by 1 upon PE and RH in N-type is given by minus 1 upon NP. You will have a negative sign because here in N-type the carriers are electrons, the majority carriers are electrons and the current is due to the electrons. So we have minus 1 upon Ne. So what P and N represent is the carrier concentration in p-type and n-type semiconductors. Now, what are the applications of Hall effect? Where all we can use these Hall effects? So, for an n-type semiconductor, RH is negative. For a p-type semiconductor, it is positive. So, by knowing the value of RH, so you can find the type of semiconductor. So, because there is a voltage that is developed, and when there is an voltage that is developed, you can calculate the value of RH, and based on the value of RH, you can find the type of semiconductor. And the next one, second one is you can calculate the carrier concentration. You are given a semiconductor and you want to know the carrier concentration, means we also call it as the density of charges or charge density. You call it in any way, it is the number of charges per unit energy per unit volume. So how do you get the concentration of charge carriers? By knowing the value of RH. So we have the formula for RH. RH is equal to 1 upon Ne. So minus 1 upon Ne for n-type. So if I want the concentration N, so I can simply, knowing the value of RH, I can simply write N is equal to minus 1 upon RH into E. E is a constant. It is the charge of the electron. E is equal to 1.6 into 10 power minus 19 coulombs. So if you know the value of RH, you can calculate the concentration of the charge carriers. Then determination of mobility of charge carriers. So mobility means depending upon the mobility of the charge carriers, you have the flow of current. So how is it conducting? Or how is the mobility of the charges? Both are related to each other. So the conductivity sigma is given by Ne mu E. Sigma here denotes the conductivity. N here is the concentration. Here I'll call, because it is an electron concentration or carrier density, I can say. And E is the charge and mu is the mobility. If I am writing E specifically, means it is the mobility of electrons. So sigma N is equal to Ne mu E. So from here we can write the formula for mu E. If sigma is equal to Ne mu E, so mu E will be equal to sigma upon Ne. So that is what we have. And we know 1 upon Ne is equal to RH. So if I write for 1 upon Ne RH, it will be sigma. I will write this as 1 upon Ne into sigma. 1 upon Ne is nothing but RH. So we'll write it as sigma N into RH. So knowing the value of RH, the Hall coefficient, you can calculate the mobility of the charges. And the same will apply for p-type also. The conductivity in p-type, sigma p will be Pe. Here P is the concentration of holes, because holes are the majority carriers in p-type. So Pe into mu p. So from this we write mu p is equal to sigma p upon Pe, and 1 by Pe is nothing but RH. So we have sigma p into RH. So after measuring the Hall coefficient and the electrical conductivity, knowing the electrical conductivity, the mobility mu can be calculated. So the mobility of the charge carriers can be calculated by the Hall effect, that is by measuring the Hall coefficient. Next one is flux density. So in some cases where you know the Hall voltage, you know the Hall coefficient, you need to know what is the magnetic field that is developed. So in that case also we can use this formula. What we have derived now is RH is equal to VH into T upon BI. This is the formula we have derived. Now we want to know what is the flux density, knowing the values of RH and VH. from the experiment. So B will be equal to VH into T upon RH into I. So the flux density B can be calculated using the Hall effect, knowing the Hall coefficient. So using a semiconductor sample of known Hall coefficient, if the Hall coefficient is known, then the magnetic flux density B can be easily calculated using the formula B is equal to VH into T upon RH into I. Then to determine the sign of the charge carriers, we have also seen this. So whether the conductivity is due to electrons or holes, we can know. So if the conductivity is due to the electrons, then the sign of the charge carriers is negative. So it is all related to each other. If you are getting the value of RH to be negative, means it is due to electrons. So if it is due to electrons, that means it is N-type. So in N-type, electrons are the majority carriers and their sign is negative. So to determine the sign of the charge carriers, we are using this. Other applications which we see in our day-to-day life. We see in our smartphones, they are equipped with magnetic compass. All of you must have seen. So how does this work? In a smartphone, whatever magnetic compass we have. So what happens, this compass, what does it measure? It measures the Earth's magnetic field using a 3-axis magnetometer. So this magnetic compass is used to measure the Earth's magnetic field, which shows the direction. And these magnetometers are sensors that are based on Hall effect. So these sensors, they produce a voltage which is proportional to the applied magnetic field, and they also sense the polarity. Polarity means the sign, positive and negative. That is how they work in a smartphone. Then coming to current sensors, when you have to sense the current in a circuit or in a equipment. So when electrons flow through a conductor, a magnetic field is produced. This is the known fact. And it has several advantages when we are using this as a current sensors. There is no additional resistance that is to be placed in the primary circuit. You don't need any resistance, which we call it as shunt. A resistance which is connected in parallel in a circuit, we call it as shunt. So there is no need for any shunt if you are using these current sensors. Then also the voltage present on the line can be sensed and it is not transmitted to the sensor. Without getting transmitted, you can measure it. So it will ensure or enhance the safety of the measuring equipment. This is also one greatest advantage. And then in automatic fuel level indicators. We all see these fuel level indicators in our vehicles, in our 4-wheelers, 2-wheelers, everywhere you need to know how much fuel is left in your vehicle. So what is the main principle on which it operates? Again is the Hall effect. So what happens here is, the principle of operation is an indicator is position sensing of a floating element. Main principle here is we are using a floating element which senses. What does it sense? A button magnet is mounted on the surface of the floating object. So suppose you have the fuel. So on the fuel, you will have a button magnet, a small magnet. That is what we call as a button magnet, is mounted on the surface of a floating object, an object which is floating on the liquid. We are putting this magnet. And then there is a current carrying conductor which is fixed on the top of the tank lining up with the magnet. Along the same line with the magnet, we are placing a current carrying conductor. Now, as the level of fuel rises, an increasing magnetic field is applied on the current carrying conductor, resulting in higher Hall voltage. So, as the level increases, what happens? The magnet comes very near to the current carrying conductor. So there will be more Hall voltage that is developed. So there is an increasing magnetic field, so the higher Hall voltage. And as the level of the fuel goes down, away and away, so there will be a decrease in the magnetic field. So there will be a decrease in voltage. So the fuel level is indicated and it is displayed. Okay, you can see it in an analog manner. It is displayed by proper signal indication of the hall voltage. So you can refer to books by Palaniswamy, Engineering Physics, and Engineering Physics by Gaur and Gupta for more details into this topic. Thank you. See you again in the next lecture.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.